Joining me now in studio to my immediate right is Pauline Vata. She's the Executive Director of Haki Jamii. Next to her is Dr. Collins Odote, who is a lawyer and land expert. And next to him is Esther Passaris, Nairobi Women Rep. And you're all welcome to the program. Pauline, let me begin with you because we've seen rights defenders come out quite loudly on this issue. What concerns you the most in terms of how these evictions have been done?
I think we all agree that the evictions were inhumane, the most inhumane we have seen in the recent past. We did not have resettlement options given to the tenants who were evicted. There was no compensation that was given to these families. They were evicted when it is very cold and they have no other place to go. The government planned the missing link for such a long time. It's worth 2 billion shillings. The kind of relocation that we are asking for these families cannot even reach the 2 billion Kenya shillings that the government has planned for this road. And who is going to use these roads anyway? It is the people. So why don't you plan for the people as you plan for your infrastructure? Resettlement action plans are not that costly if they're done way in advance. The PS said that the road reserve has been in the government's radar for the last almost 30-40 years.
Yes, since the
so
70s.
It's taken them that long to plan. So why couldn't they have planned, the relocation and resettlement of these communities in good time, as opposed to just bulldozing people? People lost their livelihoods. We have the school-going children who don't have schools anymore. KCP is in a month or two to come. We also have people who are HIV positive. Their medicines went with the bulldozers, and these are things that people are not talking about. We have health clinics that were demolished during the eviction. We also have water and sanitation facilities where all these people gone to, 10,000 plus people. And the PS was saying that they are tenants, they have gotten homes in other informal settlements, but this is not how to treat your citizens.
Okay. What are the legal issues around the way in which these demolitions were done?
Thanks, Anne. I think in 2016, Parliament amended the Land Act, and the amendment of the Land Act followed a judgment from the High Court, and that judgment set out the criteria for evictions. And if you look at the manner in which the evictions were done, they essentially violate the provisions of Section 152 of the Land Act. Section 152 of the Land Act has very clear provisions on how to carry out evictions. Amongst other things, people should be given adequate notice. Secondly, these evictions must be done in a manner that respects people's dignity, respects people's lives, respects people's security. And number three, it must be able to ensure that their property and possessions are secured. If you listened to the PS, two things came out for me. The first is it was nice that he was recognizing that these people required to be compensated will be compensated. But it was disturbing that that compensation will happen when they don't need it. Because the only reason why they're being compensated is to enable them to be able to find alternative places to relocate.
But not just that. I mean, he was saying they pretty much they're not entitled to.
That was actually my second issue. My second issue is that he then says that they're just tenants. I think he forgot that they're human beings. And the reason why they're being compensated and the reason why evictions are happening in a humane manner is because they have a constitutional right, Anne. They have a constitutional right under Article 43 to adequate housing. And the issue of informal settlement has been with us for a very long time. So you just can't wake up and then get rid of people without caring about the manner in which it's done and the implications on people's livelihoods.
Esther, I know you've been there and you've, in the last week or so, visited with these families. But by and large, what we heard from them is this would never have happened pre the handshake, and that in some ways in their minds, yes, they said this to us off camera, that in some ways in their minds, post the handshake, it has facilitated this sort of action being taken against them, and that they haven't heard, they haven't had rather substantive help from their area representatives, be it blankets, food, water, tents, or even hearing just that consistent voice that's advocating for them.
First of all, I mean, when they say they haven't, let's start with whether it was right or wrong. It was absolutely wrong. I think the government has to be sensitive to all its citizens. getting blankets, you know, I've actually bought about 200 blankets with friends from ODM. We got together, we bought about 200 blankets. But when we're thinking about where to go and who to give, it's so limited. I've been trying to conduct devolution. I've even spoke to the DCC and asked him, can we do something? You know, but everybody's disconnected from the whole thing. And I know that there's going to be a lot of deaths out of this destruction. A lot of people will die. Because when I saw this woman who came forward and her daughter was there, her clothes were all torn, she had nothing else. She looked so stressed, her legs were swollen, that means she had hypertension. I feel that to help them requires government. Even from the woman rep's office, to try and get an approval. I mean, right now we're at that stage where money is returned back to government, then we have to apply for it back. I asked for disaster, we get 1 million shillings for disaster. And for the whole of Nairobi, for the whole year, it's so little. So when I asked to shift 5 million shillings for even the Gikomba victims, up to today we never got an approval. So I want to say that the only person who can manage this demolition disaster, as I call it, is the government. The government needs to care about its citizens. It's mandated to care about its citizens. There are voters there for the government. And now that we have the handshake, for me, I believe that those voters are embraced by the handshake. So we need to actually go in there. We need counseling. We need food, because they don't have a place. And they haven't been paid this 10,000. Do you know, I mean, when you speak to the PS and he tells you about the 10,000 compensation, he says it will be paid in 3 weeks. I mean, how insensitive can you be? Shouldn't we have paid them? Shouldn't we have counseled them? Shouldn't we have facilitated them even more? Because Nairobi doesn't have the housing. And right now you're talking about Deep Sea next, and you're talking about Gara. When you displace all these people, where do you expect them to go?
Yeah, and that really is the question. I mean, Pauline, and some estimates have put it as high as 30,000 people who are displaced. Some more conservative figures are at around 10,000. Be that as it may, thousands of people removed from their homes pretty much overnight. Where do they go, and what is the impact of that kind of mass removal of people?
Actually, that's mass displacement of people. And, you know, government has a shortfall in housing. It doesn't have an option on where it is taking these people. So what we are creating is more informal settlements, because these are people with low income. They won't go to live in, you know, the suburb areas that we have so many to rent, to let spaces that people are not renting. So you find, even now when you go to Kibra, the rent has gone so high in Kawangware, the rent has gone so high because so many people have become displaced by these evictions. But also what we need to question is the government's Big Four agenda. The government has said that it is going to deliver affordable housing. Since 1963, government has only done 1,000 units for the low-income people. But somehow they're telling us in 2022, they'll have gotten to 200,000 mark. Yet they have displaced 10,000 people without giving them alternative housing or alternative resettlement. So, I mean, I think government policy is not in sync with their actions. For them to, you know, have eviction notice that call people's homes illegal structures, what are you saying? Where has the government been all these years than to provide the legal structures that they want people to have? You know, they have not provided schools in Kibra, and people did that. Clinics, and people did that. And then you come and demolish and call them illegal.
It was interesting to see that even the First Lady's, you know, Beyond Zero clinic was equally
demolished.
Yeah, removed.
Yes.
Be that as it may, there have been some court cases around this issue. Right now, Collins, what options do residents have?
And as we talk about the options the residents have, I think let me just underscore one other thing that we may be missing. Just last year, there was an entire effort led by the same ministry where the PS comes from, the Ministry of Infrastructure, to try and develop guidelines for tenure regularization. Those guidelines were completed in November, talking about structured processes of upgrading slums and of protecting the rights of tenants. To see what government has done just after they've developed those guidelines, I think it defeats the entire purpose of what government is trying to do. Having said so, I think the options that exist for the tenants is of the people in informal settlements is the option of going to court for that to be stopped. But we have an entire court process that tells government, don't do this until this happens. So I think we shouldn't be saying that the option is for them to go to court, because these are people who are even looking for 10,000 shillings. So to go to court will require them to have money. I think the option that exists first is the Ministry for Infrastructure to acknowledge the mistake they have done and to right that wrong. And it doesn't cost much. If you're talking about paying 10,000 shillings for a family, for a project that takes 2 billion shillings, what's the rush of putting people onto the streets?
Esther, I want to talk about the, the balance, priorities. I want to talk about priorities because the one who sits behind the desk planning the country's infrastructure possibly, has a point. We're losing this much in the economy of Nairobi. We need to get the city moving and working, etc. And, that is why such a road is necessary. Fine, roads are good. At the same time, you are putting up this road. Fine, they call it a road reserve. But there are real needs for that community, which are very basic, like, a working sewage system, water, etc. And because you are now in a position to help shape policy in that sense, what should the balance be? Because, as she's saying, it seems like, the government's development projects are kind of at loggerheads with people.
We need the infrastructure. Nobody is disputing that. We need the roads. From 2016, they've been planning all these bypasses. We need the roads. It's costing them too much not to have done it. But you see, who is at fault? It is the government that was exercised laxity in dealing with the issues. They just think that we can just come with bulldozers, clear everybody, and we don't care where they go. If the government cared, remember when we had the post-election violence, we had big, huge IDP camps. Where's all that infrastructure? We have it somewhere. So if we decided we want this road to continue, we haven't got the houses yet. We look at the families we have. These are tenants. We look at who is employed in Nairobi, who's unemployed, who's running a business, who's not running a business. Let's find some land somewhere. All right, and we have a lot of land. Government can find land. Let's find the land. Let's pitch the tents. Let's put the families there. These are Kenyans. We're housing refugees from other countries, and yet we're displacing our own citizens. Let's put the tents. Let's say, okay, and then you start a counseling process. You bring Huduma there, and we have one purpose. We have one purpose to find out what is it that you're doing in Nairobi. Are you employed? Do you have land up country? Can we work with the county government and help you out? Can we give you capital to go back home? Because today we were giving a lot of checks as government for women enterprise, Wezo Fund, Youth Fund. So when you're displacing so many people, and you have to understand these citizens, because these are Kenyans, okay? And we have to care for our own before we can care for others. So when we're talking about the government's policy on housing, brilliant. Nobody's disputing that. On food, brilliant. Okay, manufacturing, brilliant. What could the government have done? Understand the makeup of the people that you're displacing. Look at how can we accommodate them into the government plan? How can we actually put some money there? Do you know what? If you're talking about 10,000 families, compensating them with 10,000 shillings, you're talking 100 million. You want to tell me the government couldn't find 100 million to pay these people before they started the demolition?
That's a valid question. But another one is being raised about the responsibility of the county government in this matter, and particularly the Nairobi Regeneration Unit. Some claiming that it is this unit that is pretty much issuing the instructions on who is removed, as opposed to the National Land Commission doing so. As a member of the Nairobi leadership, is that your knowledge of what is going on? Is this being run by a committee who some say, has not even been gazetted? We don't know what their, terms of reference, etc. are.
Let me tell you, for me as a leader, it doesn't matter which arm of government is doing this. Okay, and I don't want to get caught in those sideshows. At the end of the day, it is government that is actually victimizing its citizens. So that's what we have to deal with. And somebody has to care. Somebody has to care.
But Anne, you actually raised also an important point. The National Land Commission actually has a statutory responsibility in the process of evictions and resettlement, actually a constitutional one. If you look at the same section 152 that I talked about, the notice process is actually supposed to be given the National Land Commission. If you watch the last 1 week, you've heard the chairman Swazuri speak. What does he even speak about? Ruarak. I have had no statement from the National Land Commission concerning Kibera. Issue number 2, Anne, that I think is also important. Just 3 years ago, NYS was in Kibra, trying to upgrade Kibra. Now, 3 years later, we're actually evicting the same people that we're trying to upgrade from. What exactly are we trying to do as government?
Speaking of the evictions, some of the residents told us that they fear that there is a systematic plan to get rid of Kibra as we know it. Is that the understanding of anyone seated at this table? That they have been citing, you know, the, different demolitions over the last 3 or so months, right after the Moi Girls incident, etc. They claim that they have been warned of more that are coming around the electricity transformers near the river, and are concerned that this is part of a larger scheme to get rid of the settlement entirely. Is that something you're privy to, and how would you respond to that?
You know, I think after the Kibra evictions, we've gotten 2 more notices. One for 1st of August, which is the day after tomorrow. That's going to affect 6 more informal settlements. No relocation action plan, no compensation, no nothing. No 3-month notice has been given. National Land Commission is completely in the dark. The multi-sectoral committee is the one that's issuing those eviction notices. We have another one for the 8th of August. You know, for people in City Carton. And then again, the PS said Deep Sea and Ngara areas. All these are being done illegally. National Land Commission, completely mum. County government, mum. And we're just watching as informal settlements are being criminalized. You know, I think it is wrong. The government should stop. The multi-sectoral committee should be disbanded immediately, because that's how you create anarchy in a country. Even tomorrow, people with title deeds then will be evicted if we continue with the same trend that you're seeing.
All right, we have 30 seconds. Final comments, Dr. Collins. Way forward.
I think the way forward, Anne, is we need to balance between the right of getting rid of those who are in illegal and irregular places vis-a-vis the mechanism of ensuring that as we do so, we respect the rights of citizens to housing. And I think we aren't doing that as government.
Government needs a human touch. I mean, government is for the people, by the people. And as long as we lose touch with that and we create more poverty, then we're giving with one hand and we're taking with 10. We need to be able to balance the two.